Welcome to Berries in the Interim podcast, where we explore the cutting edge of innovative clinical trial design for the pharmaceutical and medical industries, and so much more. Let's dive in.
All right, welcome everybody back to In the Interim. I'm your host, Scott Berry, and I have a guest today, Dr. Jenny Devenport. And Jenny is and I want to get the title because this is part of a lot of questions I have. She's the global head of methods, collaboration, and outreach at Roche. So Jenny, welcome to In the Interim.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
All right, so we're going to get to what is a global head of methods, collaboration, and outreach. What does that mean? But let's talk a little bit about how you got there. And we'll talk about where you are as well. I think that's an interesting part of the story in this. So let's talk a little bit about how did you become a statistician? I think initially you may even have studied psychology from New Mexico. How does somebody get from New Mexico and psychology to statistics in pharma?
These are great questions. Let's unpack this a little bit. Let's start with geography first. So I'm from New Mexico, which is in the southwestern United States and includes part of the Rocky Mountains. For my friends in Europe, if you don't know where that is, don't worry. A lot of people in the US don't know where that is either. It's a running joke in a tourist magazine for a long time. New Mexico is known for a few things. The best green chili in the world, no debate on this. The Roswell incident, the test site for the first nuclear bomb, and slightly more recently, for a hit TV show. That's New Mexico, but also for physics, right? And mathematics. And that's where I grew up. And now I'm in Switzerland. And that's fascinating because my grandmother is from Switzerland. So I worked really hard to get here over a long period of time. And it's kind of a funny story, but that's the geography piece. So let's go to psychology to statistics.
Is that fair? Is it originally was your interest psychology? I think you're...
My interest was originally psychology, and I believed that going into university that I wanted to study clinical psychology and come out and help people and counsel and whatever. And my very smart mother believed that that might not be the most employable occupation. And she encouraged me to study nursing, of all things. So, wiggly line of career path. Yep. But in the end, the university that I attended had a strong experimental psychology program. And after completing the agreed upon amount of nursing coursework, biology, anatomy and physiology, neuroscience, etc., I changed majors. Biggest rebellion of my life. And I moved into experimental psychology, and I knew I was going to need statistics. So I took two courses, one in the math department and one that was actually a graduate level course in the psychology department.
Okay, so now, I'm sure you have the same experience that if I meet somebody and they ask me what I do, I try to delay saying statistics because you invariably get I hated my statistics course, or I love my statistics course. So you were thinking about nursing, psychology. You said I had to take statistics. Were your first courses interesting? Were they life-changing, or were they a course you had to take?
So, my original idea was, this is something I might not be good at. I better fail now, and then I'll know. And the experience in the math department was amazing. And the experience in the graduate level course in the psychology department was also amazing. And these were the days when they still ranked students in the classes by their performance. And I was an undergraduate, and I got the top rank in the course. So my advisor was like, maybe you should consider going into statistics. And so that was, again, a really interesting and kind of, life altering moment for me to go, oh, okay, this is what I should do.
Yeah, fascinating. Amazing in how much the counselor, your initial teachers of that course, had they been not very good or enthralling, maybe you'd have hated the subject. So it's amazing how much people may have impacted that. So then you get a degree in psychology, and then you go to the University of Denver. By the way, there's a theme here of you following mountains in this, getting bigger and bigger as you go in this. So University of Denver, that was still psychology, or was that very much the plan was quantitative at that point?
So that was a psychology department, but the degree program I entered was quantitative. Now, when I got there, it turned out, I was fully funded for statistics, awesome, but I was only student in the statistics program in the psychology department. However, there were collaborations with statistics students in the schools of education and business. So I automatically was primed for the importance of collaboration and the willingness to attack problems regardless of the subject area.
Okay, so you're there, you get a PhD, University of Denver, and then what? What was the plan for what you were going to do? And going back to your mom, who wants you to get a job and thinks nursing, and so what next?
So I was looking at pharma. I never really wanted to be a professor. I liked teaching, but I knew there was more to it. And I wasn't really sure that that was in line with this whole get a job and be self-sustaining thing. And so I looked at pharma, but I wasn't looking to live on either one of the coasts where all the pharma was at the time in the US, or a lot of the big pharma was at the time. And so I went to work in public health. And that's not all bad, because I learned a lot more about working with big data, terabytes, and also how medicines impact healthcare systems. So that I would say was an important experience to have in hindsight. And eventually then I broke into pharma and did drug and device development, but mostly in the late phase.
And by the way, you left the mountains and you came here to Austin, Texas. So you spent time in Austin, Texas, where it is the hill country, but I don't think people say this is the mountain country. Your first title as a statistician then was, at what point where you go to a holiday party and somebody says, oh, what do? Do you say, I'm a statistician?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
no,
okay,
I said I was a statistician, and they quickly got nervous and walked away.
Yeah. I know that response.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm all right with that. Yeah.
Yep.
And so then we would shift the conversation to music or the mountains, and everything was fine again. Yeah.
Okay. And so then through pharma, through medical device companies, through Genentech, now, interestingly, at Genentech, I think you did an international assignment, which took you to where your mother was from, Switzerland. Yeah. So what was the genesis of that?
So, as I said, my grandmother, that was very involved in raising me, came from Switzerland, and she was this absolute force of nature, 4 foot 8 inches tall, and could absolutely snap you in two. But she was amazing, and I always had it in my head that I really wanted to go and see Switzerland. And the first pharma company I worked for did have Swiss headquarters, but I couldn't persuade them to send me. And at Genentech, after some time and some discussion with absolutely anyone who was standing still, I finally irritated the right person, and they sent me away to Switzerland. And from there, I did what I usually do, and I make my own luck, and I got to stay.
Oh, very nice. And so now you you're at Roche and you're in Basel.
Yes.
This is home base for you at this point, and that leads to from associate director of biostats, people and product leader, to global head of methods, collaboration, and outreach. So it's such an interesting title, and an interesting job from the aspect of global head of methods. Sounds like you're doing statistics. You're creating methods to handle problems. And I love one of your statements of who you are. The very first thing says, I solve problems. That sounds like going about solving problems, but then collaboration is a whole different thing, and a really interesting thing from a statistics perspective, and outreach. These sound like three very, very different things.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. This is one of my favorite roles that I've had to date. I've only worked in statistics, but what this role is that I lead a group of expert statisticians and a statistical software engineer to develop and scale statistical methods. And so doing this successfully requires all three words, all three pillars. Looking at methods and looking at what's going to be most useful, devising new ones if we need to, collaborating with others, with internal teams, with academics, with statisticians outside the company, and even with regulators, and outreach, which really entails being engaged with the academic community, taking on leadership roles in local or regional or even global statistics associations, and engaging in external initiatives with these people. And because it's really important for scale. When you're solving complex company problems in collaboration with teams, of course, that's critical. But if you want to stay ahead of the trends and look for new opportunities, you need to look beyond, the walls you're in, right? And so that's where all those three pillars kind of come together. And that's what everybody on my team does with extraordinary efficiency. And something that I have found to be, really exceptional about working in Europe is just this sense of collaboration, and we can solve these problems together.
Yeah, very nice. And you do have a great deal of outreach beyond Roche, say, where FSPI methodology group and gatherings of statisticians in Europe, which see that. Presumably, when collaboration and outreach, that sounds like a really important part of the job.
Absolutely. And it's funny, I brought my team, which is global, to Switzerland for the annual FSPI regulatory workshop in August. And one of my US teammates said, it's like a family reunion, but good. And I thought that was perfect.
Right.
Because
right.
It really is, kind of a gathering of statisticians from academia, from industry, from the regulatory agencies. And we sit down and we talk about statistics, and we talk about what our common challenges are, what are, what's working really well, where we disagree. And it's a really great and kind of nice, safe space. And it's a different flavor than, for example, the sister conference in the US, the RASW ASA Bio conference. I'm not sure what it's called today, which is a great conference also, but very different.
So maybe I was going to go elsewhere, but let's actually go to that. I'm curious about this in part because I was in Basel last week visiting. I spend a good bit of time with EMA, the U.S., interested in the difference from U.S. to Europe. And you've worked in the U.S., you've been a statistician in the U.S., you've gone over and spent a fair amount of time in Basel. The cultural differences, statistical cultural differences, we have certain stereotypes in the U.S. and all of that. Is it different working with the different group, if you have a different group there, or just the general approaches? Do you find differences, or largely are they more similar than different?
There are definitely differences. And let me see if I can think of all of them to tackle. So I think the first word that I would use in Europe is altruism. this idea that we're all working together for a common goal or that we're all in this together, I think there's more of a sense of that here than I experienced anyway when I was working in pharma in the US, where there was much more of a sense of competition within the company and with other companies. I think the second thing that's really important is that there aren't as many pure statistics academic degrees here. So a lot of the colleagues that you're working with have their PhD in mathematics. And so they learn statistics on the job. It's a different thing. I think the third thing
I'll interrupt that and we'll get to the third thing. But the competition versus more altruism in that, is there more changing of jobs in the US where somebody goes from one pharma to the other and all that, where maybe there's more long-term employment at a single place? Is that different?
Yes, but I think that's an issue of scale, right? I mean, for example, if you're on one of the coasts in the US, there's a whole bunch of pharma and biotech companies. So it's very easy to jump around and grow your career or jump the ladder by changing companies, right? And there aren't 60 companies in one place in Europe. So people do tend to, kind of get entrenched and be part of the family.
Though Basel is becoming almost a Boston, San Francisco in terms of drug development.
Absolutely. I mean, they have big pharma companies. They have a lot of biotech companies. And of course, there's even more biotech companies spread throughout Switzerland. And so, it's a great place to be.
Yeah, very much. And I interrupted you. You were going to say a third thing that was different between the US and Europe.
The third thing that I know, that I personally have experienced, and this is, I have talked to friends and they say this is true at their companies as well, is that Europeans like to have the debate. A lot of times decisions are made in the US and then just pushed over the ocean to Europe. And then the US colleagues are surprised that the Europeans aren't just instantly on board and want to have the debate. And I've kind of had to sit down with people and say, hey, wait a minute. What if you spent 2 hours letting them kick the tires on this? What would that really cost you if it's going to allow them to feel comfortable with the decision that's already been made? I mean, ideally, you would include people in the decision. But if you're not going to do that, then spend a couple of hours with them and let them have the debate with you so that they can come with you on this journey. And when you put it like that, it doesn't sound so unreasonable, right?
Yep. No, certainly not. An interesting part of that is the statistics community, and there's the stereotype that we are introverted, that we sort of go to solve a problem and we love to solve a particular problem. It might not be the problem we're actually trying to solve, but we love to have our own little things we work on. A part of that you described, having that debate and having that impact, is the ability for the quantitative statisticians to have an impact in those decisions, not just to debate something that's already done, but to have an impact on that. Is part of this outreach and communication creating that skill for statisticians to have an impact? Is part of your job maybe methods where you're trying to solve problems, but then you're working on people and making them better at solving problems and outreach and communication?
I would say that in the earlier roles I had, where I was working with project statisticians, I was focused very much on them being able to communicate and influence their teams. And that was just a way of working. With methods experts, by the time they're at that point, They wouldn't get there if they weren't good communicators for the most part. They have to be, and they know how much more efficient being a good communicator makes them.
Nice. Okay, so the part of this, it was interesting where in your sort of statement is I solve problems. And now it sounds like you're creating methods and you're sort of working more broadly, say, to be able to more broadly apply methods and move that forward, software for that, it sounds like, where you're almost trying to solve tomorrow's problem a little bit, where it's not, in a way, somebody could come to you and say, here's problem A, I need to solve problem A. A side question is trying to figure out exactly what they're trying to solve is a huge part of being a statistician. It's much easier if it comes, rarely does a problem come and say, this is what I need to solve. So figuring out what it is to solve, but you're trying to solve tomorrow's problems, it sounds, as much as a single problem, which must be a very different sort of way of going about your job than solving problem A and then worrying about tomorrow.
Well, we have to do both, right? And so what you're talking about with understanding someone's problem is a consultation. And that's, I'm going to work with these statisticians on this team and help them find the best method to solve their problem. And that's great. But any consultant could probably do that, whether it's inside the company or external to the company. The difference, as you say, is scale. When I start to notice, or when the team starts to notice that we're getting, a similar pattern of questions from different teams, and we have to say, hey, wait a minute, we've got a trend here that we need to get out in front of. This is becoming, an issue. They're all getting the same questions from a health authority. They're all getting challenged to do a particular design. The way the field is moving is this way. And that's one scale thing. And that may or may not involve new methods as much as it does getting people to operate in an effective way that is consistent. And for example, since we're in the interim, futility analysis in late stage studies is a great way to mitigate risk. When I look at the literature today, it looks like just over 50% of phase 3 studies succeed, which still means there's a gap, right? There's still some uncertainty in whether or not this product is going to launch. So having a futility analysis, at least one, somewhere in the 30 to 70% information is probably a good idea to mitigate risk for patients and for your company. So that's one thing that, again, trying to get that to consistency and having a solution that statisticians can apply fairly consistently across the company, across the industry, makes a lot of sense. There are, many other examples. I think there's a lot of talk right now across companies and with regulators about things like external control arms, about covariate adjustment to make trials more efficient, using Bayesian analysis more. All of these kinds of things are coming up a lot, and we're trying to make sure that we keep an eye on all of those trends and then how they fit in our portfolio.
Very nice. I'm amazed at how, controversial futility analyses are. It seems so straightforward. It also seems like a really valuable tool that by employing futility analyses, I might be more willing to have adaptive sample sizes that go larger because I know there's at least some likelihood of success there, and I'm not building this huge behemoth, but I can gradually do it. It's such a valuable tool. So it's great. And of course, so maybe a question, you brought it up, but we generally behave Bayesian here in the interim. Do you see an increase in Bayesian methods? Do you see this as something moving at a higher rate within pharma?
I think pharma is still lagging a little bit behind. Of course, when I worked in devices, it was more common. And there's an obvious reason for that. Devices work. From an efficacy perspective, if you implant a device into somebody, it's going to work. It's just whether or not it's safe enough to do that. But when you're working with a drug, and again, we're working with still, sometimes 40% of phase 3 trials failing, there's a lot of uncertainty there. And I think that's, part of what is causing some hesitancy in the adoption of Bayesian in later stages. But certainly you see it a lot more in pharma in early phase trials to inform decision-making, to incorporate a lot more of the knowledge that people have, whether it's from in-house studies or from external studies that are sufficiently related.
And the question I'm frequently asked, so I'm going to turn the tables and ask you, is within this statistics community is the role of AI. And is this a depressing thing as a statistician that AI is coming for our job? Is this an optimistic thing that AI, I'm just going to be that much more effective and I can do my inferences and I can use my science, but the other stuff is easier to do? How is AI impacting pharma right now? And what do you see going forward? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about the role of AI in the field of statistics?
So for the field of statistics per se, I think we have a lot to learn. And I want to break that down in a couple of ways. So first of all, I'm going to start with the non-technical side of it. Is here you have a solution that comes up with an answer very quickly and very politely. And it is very targeted towards things that executives care about. Going fast. It seems cheap, though it may or may not be. We can discuss that. And, maybe the claims about success are slightly exaggerated, or they're completely accurate in contexts that don't apply to the new situation. And I think there's something for a statistician to learn from that, is we tend to focus a lot on uncertainty, right? And as you pointed out, we're introverts, so we're not always precise with our communication. We're a little bit pessimistic. We're a little bit known for being the no police. And so when you compare a very slick AI executive who says, we can solve your problems and make you faster and better, to a statistician that says, well, I want to talk to you about uncertainty. And that's our best argument, by the way. It's obvious to see the gap that we have to bridge. I think we can do it, but I think it is really a sign that it's time to work on how we communicate and how we influence decision-making, because we have a lot of good solutions to offer. But we have to think about what does our audience want and tailor our message to that. So I think, to get back to your original question, what do I feel about the AI and statistics? I'm excited about the potential. I think we have a lot to learn. And I think it would be a mistake to fold our arms and say, this is a fad and it will pass.
Yeah, right. And would you say you use AI now? If somebody says you're at a Christmas party and somebody says, oh, do you use AI? How do you respond to that?
In my day-to-day job, I would say occasionally I will use AI to see how it would approach things. And it's like the bad first draft, at least for what I do. Is I'll see the question maybe and the answer. I'll refine the question a little bit and see if I get a better answer. And then I'll say, okay, that's not where I want to go, but now I know where I want to go. And so I will use it for that. Certainly for some, really dry start coding projects, it can be useful. If you're truly starting from a blank page, which doesn't happen very often, But, on the occasion when I'm starting from truly a blank page, maybe AI is useful for me today. That said, I would still say that I have some things to learn. So I'm very excited when I get to partner with people who know more about AI and less about statistics, so we can kind of try to bridge that divide.
Very good. Let's return a little bit to the communication thing, which I think is a huge passion of yours. Is communicating from a quantitative perspective, and your thoughts on this. First of all, the importance of this. It's hard to understate the importance of, or it's hard to overstate. My communication is not very good. The importance of this, but seems very much a passion of yours, is the ability to communicate, talk to decision makers, impact decision makers through communication.
Well, I think, I've been in the field for a long time, and again, only on the business side of things. And what I have seen is what it costs companies when they don't listen to the statistician. And to be blunt, shame on us if we cannot get our ideas communicated effectively. So I've really taken the approach of, what is it that I can control and what is it that I can help my team with so that we get our point across and we bring people over to the right side, as it were. So this involves, statisticians have a tendency to focus very much on being very, very precisely correct. And people expect that of us. And so they're not wrong for being, for trying to be right. But when it comes to communication, that's a very small piece of the puzzle. It is very important to meet your audience where they are and talk about the points that are most relevant to what they're worried about. And again, at the C-suite, it's speed, it's cost, and it's probability of success. And so all of your solution needs to be tailored to those three messages. If you want to have proof in your backup deck, great. It shouldn't be in the first 40 slides.
Probably shouldn't be 40 slides, I'm guessing.
Probably shouldn't be 40 slides. But, pharma takes on scale.
Yeah. So you brought up a really important concept, and you described that it's about speed, it's about probability of success, resources. That's their language. That's their business, their science, are those things.
Yes.
And that's when a statistician starts to go talking about their science. I don't think it's all that different in talking to a clinician or working with a team. And if you spend your time talking about power and effect sizes and our business, what we're really good at, and they're in our field, I think we're losing the communication battle. They're trying to do our job to some extent. But if we're talking about the science of the treatment, of the disease, of the endpoints, and then when we're talking to C-suite, we're in their business, as you said, meet them where they are. That's, I think, when the statistician has this incredible ability to have an impact, but it's getting on their side of it as opposed to, defending our turf on statistics.
Absolutely. And I think, with the medical team or with your study team, at least on the industry side of things, their priority is a couple of things. They want to keep patients safe and they want to meet timeline expectations. Because they have very little control over anything else, like whether the drug works. So if you're going to, as a statistician, blow up their timelines, you better be able to explain why they should care, what it will take, and why they will be heroes for doing it.
Yep. And I was looking through some slides of a presentation you did, and one of your points was and I'm messy. Actually, I will try to get the terminology here of what you say, because I think this is important. That if you're forcing them to a decision, they don't actually believe in it, kind of thing. And this aspect of what you described about timelines, bringing in a new thing, it's also part of this is making it feel like that's their decision. You know, you help them to see the way, but they made the decision. Now, all of a sudden, the whole team's moving towards it, and they're not already pessimistic about it, or they feel like you forced them somewhere.
Absolutely. I think one of the, kind of at the airplane level view of things, the biggest challenge in our field is our insistence on owning the solution as opposed to turning over the solution to teams to co-own that solution, right? And this is the problem of focusing on being right, is that you have to be right in context. And that means that you're going to be devising a solution that you turn the keys over to the team to co-own, especially in the medical field where, frankly, we're not in charge. We will never be physicians. We will never treat a patient, but we do have something very important to offer. And so to contribute the value that we are capable of, we have to make sure that we are willing to turn over our solutions to the team to co-own.
Yep, agree. Interestingly, you sort of phrase it that way, that we're guests in the medical field. If I were to push on that point and say the medical field is also about science, and to some extent what we are is we are clinical trial scientists, we're medical scientists. Are we not members of that field where we may not sit and talk to a patient, but I maybe inappropriately, but I feel like I'm a member of that field, and that is what I do. Is that fair?
I think it's absolutely fair.
Okay.
I think it's fair to say when we meet our teams, we're all drug developers. We are drug developers with expertise in statistics. And so when you take the, hey, we're drug developers too far, and you forget to bring your statistics with you, which can happen when you get sucked into little details of things that maybe aren't so statistical, you can run into problems. So you need to remember that your job as a statistician is to come as a drug development professional with an expertise in statistics. And that is how you get a physician to not try to do your job.
Yeah. Brilliant. How is, as we're coming to a close here, how is life in Basel outside of what seems like an incredibly a hub of science and a great place to be? How's life in Basel from somebody who grew up in New Mexico?
So I grew up in the Rocky Mountains, and so I grew up skiing, and I didn't realize this at the time, but I had kind of a Swiss experience because my mother would pick me up from school and throw me on the cable car, and I would go up to the top of the mountain and ski with my father all afternoon. And depending on where you live in Switzerland, that's just life in Switzerland. And so here, Switzerland is a small country, and so I can get away to the mountains for the day a lot of the time, and I do, and it's wonderful. And I have rediscovered, after years in flat parts of the U.S., my love of the mountains, and it's absolutely a delight, and something I try to share with my kids and anyone standing still.
And seems like a very touching connection to your force of nature grandmother, who seemed to take some of her strength from the mountains.
Absolutely.
All right, Jenny, well, I appreciate it, and thanks for joining us here in the interim.
Thank you very much. It was really fun.
And until the next time, we'll be right here in the interim.
Great. Thanks.